And we're live.
Yay.
We'll just wait a couple of minutes. Yeah, everyone can wave. We can start off like that. We generally just wait a minute or so for our viewers to start trickling in, and then we'll start off introducing everyone. Give it another moment or two. To everyone watching from the recording, in the future, apologies for this little blank spot. You can just kind of move forward, fast forward a few seconds, and we'll be getting started in just a moment. All right, so we've got a few live viewers joining us already. I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. For us, it is the evening over here in Israel and in Europe. So the topic for our webinar today is legalization in Germany. A few months ago, we had an announcement. I'm not going to go into any details. I'm going to leave that to our experts, that Germany would legalize in the future. And really the question that we're here to ask is, what does that mean? When is this going to happen? What does this mean for medical patients and for recreational users? And we're going to start digging into, all of these questions, where we can get answers, and also to understand where we don't have answers at this point, to kind of understand where there's still a bit of grey around the issue. So joining me here today, I'm going to let them introduce themselves as two of our good friends from Chiron Life, based in Germany. So we have Francie Katterbach, who's actually coming to us from Spain today. She's in Madrid.
That's true.
And we have Dr. János Kratz, who's you're in Berlin at the moment.
I'm in Berlin, exactly. Welcome.
All right, great. Thanks so much for coming. So Francie, if we can just start off, if you could introduce yourself to our viewers.
Yes, for sure. So thanks, Ilana. Thanks, Kanitma, for inviting us. My name is Francie Katterbach. I'm the president of Chiron in Europe. And to talk a little bit about Chiron, we're a vertically integrated medicinal cannabis company, and we have cooperations both in Latin America and in Europe. And I think what is very interesting about the Chiron brand is that the vertical integration on our side means that obviously we have our grow in Colombia, really the seeds, we have our own registered varieties, but we go also the pathway down to the patients where we have clinics like hospitals where we dispense our own products, but also do things like hydrotherapy, up to brain surgeries. And then we combine medical cannabis treatment where suitable. That's what we do in LATAM, and in Europe, we're currently active in two markets, and two of the main markets, it's Germany and the UK, and we dispense our dried flower products there. But we're very proud to say that we also have our Zerenia, this is our clinic trade name, our Zerenia clinics opened in the UK in November last year. And now over to János.
Hello from my side as well. My name is János Kratz. I'm a physician and cannabis consultant and educator, and I'm the medical director Europe of Chiron Life Science. And I'm really happy to be able to have this position today to talk to you guys about the legalization in Germany. I mean, this is a big topic. It's one of the biggest markets, and I think I was not the only one surprised in autumn that Germany, which is not known for pushing forward regarding some things like medical cannabis, so it was a big surprise for me as well that they plan to legalize medical cannabis. So that's the topic today, where we want to get deep a little bit more into it today.
Yeah, definitely. It was a lot of surprise. Hopefully it's a happy surprise. But let's see if we can understand that a little bit better. So for everyone who's watching live, please feel free to ask any questions. We're going to have a Q&A time at the end of the session. So you can just pop your questions in the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook or on LinkedIn. They'll all make their way over to us. Magic of the internet. But I've got a few questions prepared already because, as much as I've been researching and listening to podcasts, there's still, a lot of kind of lack of clarity around this topic. So there's buzz, definitely, and people are starting to get excited about Berlin becoming the new Amsterdam. But since the government announced that it would legalize recreational cannabis it was in October 2021, there's not been a lot of clarity on what that actually means. So I'd like to start this thing off by talking about what really happened in October. What did the incoming German government announce in the coalition statement? And I was hoping, Francie, you can start off explaining that to us.
Yes, so my way as a German lawyer, I'm happy to say
Exactly.
and to talk about it. So what happened? And I mean, we were same surprised as you. There were lots of rumors in the market, like for previous coalitions, but then it really came before the coalition was even founded. And this is very interesting. They said, okay, but we will add to our coalition contract once we are founded that we want to legalize cannabis. And reasons, what they did was very interesting. They named reasons for it, or they at least said what the target should be. They say we want to still ensure that younger people are not affected, but we want to have a smooth transition. But in the end, what happened from a legal perspective is that they kind of did a letter of intent. They said, okay, once or if we make the correlation, we might do a law on recreational cannabis in Germany. And this is where it is. I think it has a great signal effect on the market. And it's good to talk about that a German as a large market, and as Janusz already said, a very conservative market was saying that. That was kind of building the wave, but they didn't get into more detail. So when we really look into the bare facts to say what did they say, they said they want to speak about legalization for recreational use, but then it stops. So there is no detail as to whether, what quality, who is going to dispense, where's the product coming from, who's allowed to buy it. These are very, very open questions, which the new coalition, which now has been founded and is in place, will have to answer in their draft.
Okay, so it's really something more of like a statement of intent rather than, a bill.
Of course. So there is no chance that you can now sue them and say, well, you were kind of saying that. I'm suing the future coalition or now in place coalition and tell them you have to do it. They really said we will put in there in our agenda that we do it. And it's not just, okay, when they say it and release it, obviously everybody's trying to hold them to their word, but they're voted for 4 years. So nobody's saying if it happens this year, next year, or the year thereafter. They said we will look into it and we want to do it. But how the law is going to look like, and as we know, laws in Germany, they have lots of different stages, hearings they have to go through. It's Bundestag, Bundesrat, many different lobbies involved. So it's really now the question, yes, the decision is great. It's a good commitment, and I think they cannot get out of it easily. So people are now really trying to hold them to their word. But we really have to see how it looks like in the end. And the drafting will take some time, and it's a very interesting time right now because there are lots of decisions. Just looking into the UN Convention of 1961, where cannabis is regulated, if you just look into it, recreational cannabis wouldn't be allowed. I mean, there's a reason why no European country ever allowed recreational cannabis. You mentioned the Netherlands. It's interesting. The Netherlands didn't allow it. They just say, we kind of allow or ignore or don't punish it, but we don't allow it. So Germany would really be the first country with a solid setup of rules. So it's very interesting. And it's a violation of the 1961 convention, which they also have to kind of deal with because it would be as easy as a problem for other countries in Europe or who are also part of the UN Convention to import product into Germany for recreational purposes. So it's a very interesting time, and we all have to see how this is going to pan out.
Yeah, right. There's a lot of different kind of pieces to the puzzle. So, we've already got viewers here that are asking if there are any time frames for legalization in Germany. And I know the answer to that really is no. But if you could maybe give us a sense, that whole process that you're talking about the bill being written and then passed through the various different stages, how long can something like that actually end up taking?
Well, it can take how long? I mean, I'm pretty sure you know the answer, forever. But if there's a will, there's a way. But still, we have to go through the hearings. And my best guess is everything below 2 years would be just unrealistic. Because this would really mean they put it on top of the agenda and really go forward and push it. And I think we're still in a COVID environment where we all know cannabis is important, legalization is important, but it doesn't maybe rank on the top of the list of every politician. So I think if you expect something this year or next year, that would just be very, very positively thinking.
It would be even concerning if it goes too quick. Yeah. I mean, we can see right now, we can learn out of the medical field where we have now 5 years or almost 5 years of medical cannabis in Germany. and there's still lots of edges and lots of issues which have to be sorted out. And now I have the impression that it's getting more and more into a flow, let's say. But now pushing recreational too quick into it, there are too many major questions to be answered, and to be answered in the correct way, that's not an easy thing. I mean, the legal part with the UN Convention is just a part of it. We have protection, education of younger people, education of the whole society, mainly because it's a very peculiar situation that you have, like, the society divided in two. One part says, oh, this is a deadly drug and we're gonna all end up in hell. And the other part is pushing forward and saying, wow, this is the best thing ever. And that's just all start with it. And to stop a little bit one side and to push a little bit the other side, I mean, this needs like a lot of fine tuning in terms of education and destigmatization with the whole topic of cannabis in the society.
And just adding to that, I mean, the UN Convention treated cannabis in the same category as heroin. That was just transformed a couple of months ago. It's still as dangerous as cocaine in terms of just the UN Convention. So, and I find the point of Janusz very interesting, and it's a valid point to say. I mean, law is, let's be honest, law is a written paper, right? That's easy done, but there's a society. How can you transform where you told the society, well, it's bad, cannabis is just bad, it's like heroin, to now, hey, you can buy it like alcohol. This is a transition which also the society has to go through, and I'm very sure that Janusz can speak a lot to patients who maybe feel a bit embarrassed, even though we had the legalization of medical cannabis 5 years ago, but it's maybe more like, can I have cannabis? It's not that people, well, they will ask for aspirin and even maybe for opioids without a shame. But if it comes to
alcohol,
cannabis, they might feel,
no worries.
Yeah. But even with the doctor, it's like asking for opioids. It's maybe easier in some people's mind than asking for cannabis treatment.
Comes in a pill.
Yeah, comes in a pill.
Pill is always easy. Now, of course, I mean, this is a very important topic. I mean, there's still a big stigma going. I mean, of course, this is a little bit age-related as well, that the younger generations grew up a little bit more open-minded regarding the use of cannabis. But still, I mean, there's a lot of young people as well, like, don't feeling comfortable with this topic. And I think, I mean, this is just, we are the plan is to introduce a new substance for recreational use with a lot of benefits, but with a lot of problems related to it as well. I mean, it's like alcohol, the same. I mean, you can drink a beer, it's one thing, and you can drink a bottle of vodka, and it's another thing. And I mean, I'm not saying alcohol is not better or not, cannabis is not more harmful than alcohol, in my opinion, here on the medical, what we can see out of the studies, but it's still a substance which in the overconsume can do a lot of harm, especially for younger people, but as well in the excessive use and elderly, it's the same thing. So a responsible use, like with any other substance, it's the most important thing. And to start this from zero, it's as well, like, I mean, it's something very new. We haven't had that for like never, almost, like since the introduction of tobacco and alcohol. So this is something, it's like a little social experiment as well. I mean, it's interesting times. There's a lot to solve out. It's a lot to do, but exactly because of those reasons, I'm happy to know that even Germany decided that it's going to happen. That I'm pretty trustful that like the law part and the bureaucratic part in Germany is going to give us enough time to sort things out in a good way. I hope, at least.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting point, because the rules on cannabis always refer to that the benefit is better than the harm. But if you look at it, and I mean, the answer or the question goes right to Janusz, I think there's a possibility you could even like do serious harm to yourself with taking too much aspirin or like painkillers. But what is the lethal doses on smoking cannabis?
I mean, that's the advantage that we have. There's no lethal doses known. I mean, you can have a pretty bad time if you overdo. Yeah. That's not the issue. But I mean, at least we know from alcohol, if you overdo, you die. From aspirin, from ibuprofen, from simple paracetamol that we know, because the liver shuts down and we have a serious problem. So this is all like with any other substance, the same. It's about the amount we are using, and there the education regarding this, of course, it's one of the most important things. This goes in the same direction, how to use it. If we mix it with tobacco and we smoke it, I mean, if you smoke a cigarette or a cannabis cigarette, we're talking about around 700 degrees Celsius. Mixed with tobacco, you can do some harm to your lungs. If you use oils, if you use a vaporizer, it's a different thing as well. So this is all things existing. But when we talk about the introduction of it in the whole country, society needs to be educated on that. I mean, it looks very obvious if we talk about people knowing a bit about it, people smoking cannabis, or people knowing, coming out of the sector, or living in a country where recreational, it's already allowed. But I mean, to start that from zero in a country where there is not a lot of experience or a lot of culture of cannabis use and hasn't been in the past. So this is, of course, like a huge task to address to society.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
we're
I
all in
think
agreement.
yeah, we were saying, we were a little bit jokey about it. You can kill with aspirin and not with cannabis. I mean, this is not what we want either, right? I think what we want to say with this comparison, or I want to say, is like, whatever you take, you just have to be very careful, and you have to put it into perspective, and you have to have a legal scheme that addresses all the risk and all the potential that you have with anything.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And like you both said, the education is really important there across the board. And, it seems like we've got enough time to educate Germans properly about cannabis before it's going to be available everywhere. Not quite.
We can learn from the Israelis.
Germany yet. Yeah, for sure.
We should.
So János, I wanted to ask you, obviously your career has been focused on the medical space in Germany and a number of other countries around Europe. And I know your focus is really on making sure that patients get what they need. I'm interested to hear what you think these regulatory changes are likely to mean for medical cannabis patients, or if you have any concerns about recreational legalization when it comes to the medical program.
I mean, overall, I see it as a positive thing, because the stigma is still the biggest burden, the biggest problem we have regarding the therapy, that people like doctors are scared, patients are scared. So to take that fear away, to normalize it a little bit more, it can be an advantage, because I think there's not so many people being scared about asking, for example. That's the positive part of it. But I see at the other side, I mean, it needs to be done in the proper way. We have to be insisting. I mean, in Germany, we have the big advantage that the medical treatment has the possibility to be covered from the insurance. And then that's one of the highest values that the German medical cannabis law has. And of course, we are at the risk that if cannabis is openly available, that interested say, well, now you can get it at the corner, like just take it and that's it. I mean, this is a little bit talking about the situation that we can find in different other countries. In parts of the US, it's like this. In parts of Canada, it's as well. Canada, it's a little bit more medicalized. But as well, one of the biggest fears I have, it's that we have, like, at one time that we see a further stigmatization of the medical. We take medical cannabis out of this, out of the medical part, and we have like two established ways inside it. I mean, we can see that in several countries, that you have the conventional doctor and you have the cannabis doctor. And in Germany, what we have right now, it's a combination of both. So we have like cannabis completely inside the medical work. We have an interdisciplinary work inside the medical, completely inside the medical community, with exchange between specialties. And that's one of the highest values we have right now. At the other side, I mean, of course, in terms of research, I'm a bit scared, because instead of opening the indications, to opening the medical treatment to new indications, if we now have like access to recreational cannabis, again, like from the insurances, it can be said, well, anxiety and sleeping problems are not so severe. They should just get it at their side, at the recreational side, and they don't get it through the medical side. So this is not the actual problem. It's just more, it needs to be done very carefully to not medicalize recreational use, and to not stigmatize medical users. So this is something, this is again like a very thin line between both, because we can see that as well, like in different countries, that pretty much seems like that every cannabis use is medical, and it's definitely not. I mean, just because you feel a bit better, it's just not medical. Just giving an example, I mean, it's always depending on the indication. If you take benzos, you probably feel better if you don't take too many, but it's not the issue. The solution of all bad in the world is not like to take benzos now until the end of our days. So this is, I don't want to compare cannabis to benzodiazepines here, but you understand what I mean. It's like we have to see and to establish rules. What is it? A pure medical use and which should be covered by the insurance, and what is a recreational use, which is mainly for fun, which doesn't need to be covered for insurance. And that's a little bit one of the topics that I'm looking very carefully into, because that's, I think it's going to be one of the biggest tasks here, like to establish those two routes.
But for me, from my perspective, and thanks, Janos, I think you're totally right. But you as a doctor, is it really hard for you to say even now, well, this is a real patient and this one is trying to just get, as of now, cannabis, and he's just a rec consumer? So my point is that the legal framework has to be very robust, but the legal framework will never differentiate between those two. I think it's people like you, the doctors, who really know, and maybe, and it's very interesting for me to understand, like, how easy is it for you to really say, okay, this is a real patient, or maybe another one who's not a patient, I can turn him into a patient because it's just better, rather than the ones who just say, oh, cannabis, that's for free right now, so I try to go to my doctor and get it for free and tell him what he has to write on the script. So I think the real decision is made by doctors like you, correct?
Of course, I mean, that's one of the biggest tasks, of course. I mean, you can imagine that when Germany allowed the medical cannabis use, that the ones knocking at the doctor's door, the very first ones knocking at the doctor's door, were not necessarily like 78-year-old Grandma Maria wanting to treat her back pain. It was like more other people saying, interesting, like here we got some weed. And that's, of course, that's the big task. I mean, that's not new for doctors. I mean, there's a lot of people seeking for opioids in the US, more in the US than Canada, but in Europe we have the same problem at a little lower stage, but it's the same. And for other stuff as well, there's people trying to get some medicines, and it's always a big task for the doctor to find out who needs it and who doesn't need it. The thing here, of course, I mean, it's a very well-known recreational substance, and it's the thing in terms of cannabis is it's a little bit reversed than it's usual. Like normally you have a medical substance which people find out, wow, if I take it without an indication, it's feeling kind of good. So the medical substance, the medical drug, converts into a recreational drug if you use it in another environment. In terms of medical cannabis, is a bit reverse. I mean, of course, we know that in the past, like for thousands of years, there was a medical use of cannabis. But if we ask people now on the street, pretty much everybody is going to relate cannabis to the hippies, Bob Marley, and smoking weed, and not to the medical treatment. So here we have the opposite thing, that we had the recreational substance in the heads of people which converted into a medical one. So this is this strange way around, which needs, again, a lot more education and destigmatization in the brain of the people, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's an overall ideological question of drug policy in general. Like, should people be able to choose what they put in their body and, how they play with their own consciousness, or should that be something which is regulated and governed? But I'm not going to let us go down that rabbit hole, because I think we can probably both all talk about that for like half an hour each. I know I have a sense that the question I'm about to ask, the answer is yet again, we don't know. But I know a lot of people are interested to hear whether there's any indication of how cannabis will be distributed under recreational legalization. Has there been any talk about that yet in Germany?
So I think what happened when these talks came up, that the pharmacy lobby raised their hand and said, hey, we're here. If you want to do that, we're here. I think what is sad is that they said it will be specialized stores and they would require a license. But nobody ever said it has to be a pharmacy or, I mean, we know it from like cigarette stores. You cannot buy cigarettes everywhere. So there are like dispensaries of cigarettes, and you could think of that as well. This is, as you said, and it's a bit disappointing to not have an answer yet, but it's also positive because they have to leave that open. If they would have said this already, I would see there's a problem, because this is a huge decision to say, and it goes back to who's dispensing, what are the barriers, but then the question before, what is the quality we're allowing? Because we're very clear on what we allow for the medical market. It is a UGMP. There is no way around that. In the end, it has to be released as a final, finished medicinal product. There's nothing around that in Germany. So are we having a two-tier system where you say, okay, if you have medical, then you're the upper class who get the good weed, and if you have to go to the dispensary, be it like a tobacco store or something, you will get the second class cannabis? That is really a very, very open question. And I think I would even think that this is a question the current coalition have not even thought about, how difficult this is to bring all the interests. I mean, what is great taxation? Amazing. Honestly, and every cent where the German government can pay taxes on, and which we divert from the black market where people is unknown quality, it's great, right? It's generally, it's for all of us, it's just great. But it's not easy. You cannot just like click and say, well, and now we do it ourselves. It's a very complex issue. And I think, why is that so complex? Well, just look around. I mean, we have lots of European countries. They are all aware of this issue. I think all the countries would agree, we do know there's a black market, but we don't have the right recipe to get a hold of it. So there's something where Germany will really be a pioneer, either a good one or a semi-good one, because nobody answered the question. You know, Luxembourg did press release, big time, they're going to have a scheme, not there. Netherlands, it's just decriminalized, it's not legalized. Then we have Switzerland now, like starting it. But there's nothing where we could say like, okay, let's look there. And even if we do a very like a far look across the pond to Canada, well, Canada is also not comparable, because Canada, the medical cannabis is not reimbursed. So this is also a market where we cannot say, well, this is kind of, okay, let's pick the best and just put it together for German market. This doesn't work like that. So it's very interesting. And my deep hope is just that our politicians really hear to all the lobbies and get the best proposal of all of it, because they're at an intersection. There are many roads they could take right now.
I mean, the main issue here, or the main topic which is put like an issue, it's the quality. The thing is, okay, if we want quality, we need, of course, we need licensed stores where they need to be educated and people need to know about what they're selling. But to see the pharmacy as a high class medical cannabis and other stores as a lower class medical cannabis, that's not necessarily the difference between the two products. I mean, one of the most important things for medical cannabis, but which should be the same for recreational cannabis, it's the quality in terms of the pureness of the substance. There should be no heavy metals, no fungus, etc. So this is, out of a medical point of view, it's for me the same concerning for a medical patient than for a recreational patient. I mean, of course, if I have an immune suppressive patient, etc., it's even worse. But that's the same. The quality itself should be the same for both. What's their difference is the consistency of the cannabinoid content. This needs to be in the medical market very constant. It needs to be the same, because I cannot have like one strain which is super strong with 25% THC at some point, and the next batch it's going to be 15, and the next batch maybe 7, and then again 25. That's going to be an issue. I mean, those huge variations. It was now an excessive example, but this can be better tolerated in a recreational market, where I don't see a big issue here. In a medical market, I see. So this is more about the consistency of the content, of the actual content of the active principle, than of if it's a better or worse product. That's at one part. At the other part, I mean, what I was saying before with the stigma, it's something concerning me in terms of the pharmacies selling recreational cannabis in the pharmacies or in pharmacy-like stores. I mean, this is we need that clear differentiation of which is a medical use and which is a recreational use. If we sell that now in the same place, how are we going to distinguish? I mean, besides that, we have some issues with, I can't imagine that the patients are going there to get their, I don't know, diabetes drugs, and there's somebody like 2 steps in front which cannot decide if he wants a Bubba Kush or Northern Lights. So this is like something and taking 10 minutes for it. I mean, this is of course something, I think the pharmacies itself, it's not the right place there. It should be have a quality control. If that can be through a pharmacy like store, I mean, again, it's okay, but I don't see that as the only possibility. I mean, I see that the quality should be controlled before. I mean, like we have it with tobacco or like we have it with alcohol as well. We shouldn't get to that point that we need a second control of the quality of the substance, because then we have a second taxation again, and another person inside that, and the price is going to be increasing, and the government want taxes, and then we end up having cannabis at the price of like 12-15 euros a gram, and people are still going to the dark corner of the park getting their cannabis. So this is not going to be the issue. The issue for me is here really, what can we do? We have to ensure the quality. It's the most important thing for the health of the patient, but at the same time we have to have in mind the pricing, so we still can compete with the black market. And there's a third possibility in terms, I mean, this is something which is, again, it's like a gray zone, but what we have had now for 10 years, about 10 years in Spain. I mean, there's the cannabis clubs, how they exist in Spain, where you just can't enter if you're registered with your passport. You can get there. It's like a cafe and controlled environment where they do activities regarding risk prevention, etc. And you have like an open space to consume it, where it's not allowed to consume, for example, at the street. It's just allowed to consume in the club or at your home. I mean, this is, again, I'm just throwing that in the middle as another possibility, which has, again, a way more contact to the patient, which I see can has disadvantages, but can has the advantage as well to be closer to the people, to be able to do the education and the risk prevention in a better way. So you can see, just this doesn't end at the moment where it just I pay for it and I get it. I mean, there's a big part behind that which needs to be addressed, and I think all this, it's very crucial, or maybe this is like one of the most important point regarding all that talk about how we're going to create that medical cannabis, or how all that's going to happen in Germany.
Yeah, and back to your point, Janet, I think it's also, even when we say RAC and we say it's solid scheme, good quality, and dispensations are right, but still it comes back to education, because how can you expect that something where you're told, like in all our minds, yeah, these are potheads and it's forbidden, that they out of nothing know something? And I can just bring an example from the medical market, legalized in Germany in 2017, and they're still, like, even amongst doctors, there's the rumors around, oh yeah, indica versus sativa, which is, to be quite frank, from a science perspective, complete bullshit. But it's still out there. It's still in the mind as kind of this, I call it like shamanism or like semi-professional stuff, which we have to fight. And we don't have to fight only for the medical stuff, but for the rest, because this plant is amazing, but it's also very complex. It's not that you go to a market and say, I want to have like dry wet wine. I mean, I trust that anybody in the supermarket can say, well, dry, it's on there on the label. Francie, you might try this and it's okay. But what would I, if I say, yeah, I want this, I like this terpene profile. I mean, I like it that our patients, and this is what we can read on Reddit, they're very specific and they're very picky. And I like it, because patients are nothing else than customers, and customers have the right to be very picky and ask for the thing they like. But if we transfer it and open the group, who's going to cover this? Are we going to have like a new education where people do their apprenticeship on like how to sell cannabis in the right way? It's just
absolutely, I mean, you should. It's bartender education, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a barista, it's a cannabista or something. I mean, but I mean, we're joking about, but that's the reality. I mean, all this myths around, a cannabis sativa versus indica, they're still in the hat, and they were never true. And still people believe in it, or say, oh, I have this limonene terpene and it helps me. Whether this is impossible. And I want to hear you, Janusz, on that, because you have
No,
the broadest experience on your patients. They come with all the
that's
to you, right?
Very important question, because I mean that shows how few things we know still, and how difficult it's going to be, the education. Because even if we look into the doctors community, if we look into the science community, there's a lot of people. I mean, we had that as a raising topic, cannabis, in the last 5 years, but there's just a handful of people really reading the studies. And if you really read the studies, you know what we know, you know what people think that we know, or we know out of experience, user experience or whatsoever. And that's one part, what we think, what effect this is going to have on me if I smoke this variety or the other variety. And another thing is explaining in a medical way how that works. And the terpenes are a perfect example for that. We know that there are differences between the varieties, and we have subjective differences in terms of the effect they have on us. But we can see in the market for a couple of years already. First of all, like 6 years ago, nobody was talking about terpenes, and now we are talking about terpenes like we know everything. We know nothing around it. Like we know that the effect changes, and we know that this is a very interesting topic to further look into it. But like the question I get made a lot as a doctor is, okay, but this terpene is for that, and this terpene is for that. And I would love to know that, but like there's nobody knowing that. There's nobody knowing that worldwide. We have just not even 10 studies worldwide down where we can really say like the effect of terpenes in our body. We don't know the mechanisms. We don't know the receptors. We don't know if it's really be absorbed. If we talk about an extract, we just know the few things we know. We know it about inhalation. And I think it's a super interesting topic. And I'm not saying that the terpenes are not important. They are super important for treatment, but we can't just claim all that what it's claimed at the moment, because it's like, I mean, if we take the same variety, we give it to another person, he's going to describe us the opposite thing. And then we are standing there and saying, okay, this is perfect for you for sleeping, and for the guy next door, maybe it's perfect for daytime use. And then we have to try to find out, okay, which is the combination, which is the amount. I mean, there's still a lot of things to be covered. And here you can see even a lot of experts and a lot of people working in that sector don't know those little differences. And for the education, now to go back to the beginning of the question, now for all the educational part in terms of who is going to be the one working in the dispensaries, who get the license stuff, who's going to train the license stuff. I mean, here we get to the same point again. And here as well, I mean, there's still just a handful of books about medical cannabis. There's not many universities where there's a cult. So there's a huge lack of education worldwide, everywhere, in doctors, in scientists, in governments, in users, in everywhere. There's still a lot of myth, and that's a big topic which comes on top of all what we were talking about before.
And I think it's also something that's, oh, sorry. I was going to say it's happening in markets all around the world. You know, if you look at each individual state, which of course in the United States, every state tells its own cannabis story, you can see that these are the same issues being tackled across the board. I really hope that, you know, we can learn from the mistakes, certainly, that other jurisdictions have been through in order to kind of make a model in Germany that everyone else, you know, at least across Europe, is going to be able to learn from.
Yeah, and I think in the medical world, it's something that turns the world upside down, because correct me if I'm wrong, Janusz, we're used to say, there's this female, she's 40, she has this disease, she's that large, and that's her weight. This translates to blah, blah, blah of cortisone, right? This is what we like. This is what we love, to measure it and say like X translates to Z.
Guidelines.
Right. Guidelines. And this is good because it gives the doctor comfort, but also the patient say like, no, this has to work because they did my measures. It has to work. Right. And this is what we like in terms of medicinal stuff. But we all know when we look into the wine example, and I love the wine example because I think the wine plant has so much in common with cannabis. There are days where you drink this one wine, it tastes not good for you, and you have a headache next morning. There are other days where you drink 3 bottles of it, and it's okay. There is the other day where you and your friend drink the exact same amount, and she says, I'm bad, and the other one says, oh my gosh, I'm feeling great. So it's not new to us that the very same product can have different effects, and also on yourself. Like, it really depends on which status you were in, what you're drinking, how do you like it. There's one wine where every other day I think it's a different one, even though it was the same, because just I feel it is different, right?
There's the one you drink in holidays and you like it, and the one you bring home and it still doesn't taste the same anymore.
Exactly.
I mean,
so
very...
it's
but
not
the truth is, it's the same with pharmaceuticals. Like, we like to think that, you do all the calculations and then you get the 2 pills and they work. But if you go to a physician and you want to start on antidepressants, for example, they're also going to probably try a couple of different medications on you. It's trial and error, just the same as with medical cannabis treatment.
Exactly. And this is what we see every day. And this is why it's so great to have Janusz in our team to really say, how can we speak to doctors? Because doctors are our customers. We don't speak to patients. It's the doctor. And the doctor is a scientist by definition. So how can we approach him to get rid of all the hurdles, and how can we help him to get through it? And at least I call it usually, as a non-medical person, to say it's a joint venture between doctor and patient, to say, okay, let's go into it, let's be open and honest and see what works. But we have to be open and honest, because sometimes you feel when the doctor says this has to work, as a patient, and I'm a patient for other diseases, it's like you feel, okay, it has to work because you said it has to work, and I don't feel I can tell him no, not so good. I would rather switch the doctor, because I cannot tell him, because he did his best job, and I cannot tell him honestly no. So
I mean, it's kind of funny, because I've been seeing and observing that in Germany now. I came like a couple of years ago from Spain back to Germany, and medical cannabis was super new, and you had to start from zero to educate all the people about that there are different cannabinoids and all the basic stuff. You can inhale it. There are extracts. Nobody knew that. Everybody just knew cannabis, smoking. And now, like, the working again in the sector now, creating more content, like Franzi was correctly saying, like creating content for the doctors. You see that, like, it changed, but it's kind of still the same. I mean, you still are addressing ideas. Now they're getting, like, with different wrong ideas. You have to address a different myth. You have to address to be able to get forward. But it's like it's an endless thing. Of course, I mean, that's the fun part of it as well, that it's still not established. I mean, Franzi was talking about the guidelines, which I love. I mean, guidelines are super useful for medical doctors, because they do the work for you, but they never, like, you have to see the patient, still have to see the patient, and still the patient is an individuum, and it's not working for one that it's working for the others. So a lot of doctors hide a bit behind those guidelines, because it pushes away a little the personalized medicine. But in the end, I mean, what you need, if you want to do good for your patient and you want to solve that, and especially in such complicated cases like you treat with cannabis, the problem is that you have to work very closely to the patient. You have to try different products, you have to try different cannabinoids, you have to try different combinations of cannabinoids and other drugs. So this is something, it's a lot about fine-tuning if we work with medical cannabis in a multimodal treatment, for example, with pain and with different other indications. So this is something I personally love, that in cannabis there's still not many guidelines, because it gives us more space to really work with the patient and find out what's the best for him.
Yeah, it's important. All right, I promised our viewers that we would have question time, so we're going to move into question time. I'm going to start bringing us back to the topic specifically of Germany as well. Franzi, I'm guessing this is going to be a question for you. So we have a question: what are the current regulations about advertising medical cannabis right now in Germany? I added the in Germany.
Thanks. It's strictly forbidden. So what you cannot do, it's a narcotic. Narcotic means, I would say, Champions League of regulations. So it's the highest one. There are no more regulations on any substance in Germany. So as it's that, any advertisement to the public is forbidden, only to doctors like Janusz and pharmacists, because you have to treat them. This is why we have a sales force. These are pharma representatives who visit the doctors and educate them and tell them why our product's better, and really teach them on what cannabis can bring to their patients. But this is the only tool you can use in Germany.
I mean, even on the website, maybe to add all the content we do, like dosing help, talks about side effects, etc. It needs to be all protected from a separate log. So you need login. It's called doc check in Germany. I mean, there are different ones in different countries, but you need to introduce your doctor number to be able to access to that data. So they cannot be done like health claims to patients, for example.
Is it the same with any other medication, right?
No, but being a narcotic, it's even
it's really
stronger than opioids, for example.
I mean, the thing is, no, it's also everything which is prescription or in your script for it, you can't advertise. So ask yourself the question: if you watch television in Germany, you will never see any advertisement for a prescription drug. It's Wikimedia night and all these stuff you can, but all the rest is behind the curtain.
Yep. Okay, great. Thanks for that answer. I'm going to bring up our next question here. So are discussions related to decriminalization or expunging prior convictions for individuals taking place with discussions of legalization? Super relevant in conversations in the United States at the moment, of course.
I mean, this is, as I know, there is nothing planned regarding that, but I think actually we're not at the point of thinking about that. I mean, of course, in Germany, there's a lot of people having legal issues because of cannabis as well. I think it's way less than it is in the US, this topic, because here, let's say the tolerance for self-consume, it's a little bit wider. So you don't have people being in jail if it's not for like huge amounts. But I think this is the typical question which is rising once you start to write that legal paper. I mean, it's the same thing as like another question in this direction is who can purchase it? Do you need a German citizenship or a residency or something? Or do we allow like cannabis tourism like you have in different other countries? I mean, you could see in the Netherlands, they tried to change it, then some changed it, and
every few years back and forth.
I mean, this is the typical things. Once you start legalizing and you start with all the process, there's going to be like tons of those questions popping up which need to be addressed, and that's going to take a lot. That's probably the reason why it's going to take more than like a couple of months to do that.
Yeah, and as it's a federal decision, we're really not talking about only decriminalization, but legalization, where it's not just, okay, I mean, decriminalization really means, okay, we're going to ignore it and not enforce the law. But what we're doing is one step ahead. We say we will create a law which tells you what is the frame when you stay within that, you're perfectly fine. It's like that in the end, there's a difference if you buy cigarettes, wine, or cannabis, as long as you stay within that rule. And I think this is really something which has to be revealed in the future. And there are lots of follow-up questions on that.
I mean, and adding to that, we have to keep in mind Germany is a pretty federalistic country. So you have at the moment, for example, in Berlin, you can have up to 16 grams of cannabis and it counts like self-consumed. In Bavaria, it's 0. So just to show you the differences inside the country and in terms of the decriminalization, especially, this is going to be a thing which is obviously going to be discussed on a federal level as well. So there's the possibility as well that some parts of Germany, they're going to handle it in one way, and the other ones are going to handle it in another way.
Yeah, again, something that's very common in the United States in many different, you can have from county to county, dispensaries lining the street in one county and the next door there's none. All right, there's another topic here that I think is interesting for us to talk about. We kind of touched on this before. Another question from LinkedIn. What are your thoughts on taxation for adult use? $4.90 per gram seems very high, especially if the aim is to get rid of the black market. Janos, obviously, this is something you pointed to before.
I mean, I think it's a very important question. I mean, here we have to keep in mind all the processes of it. And then I've been touching that topic a bit before when we were talking about the pharmacy level. And if we need several quality controls later on, and the taxation of the state and the taxation of the producer wants to win some money in it, the state wants to win some money, and maybe there is like the pharmacist, etc., the dispensary in the end. So we have to keep in mind that it's not too much. I mean, this is depending on how how high the price is for buying it and how high we are selling it in the end. I mean, there are different models at the moment. There's something being discussed here that they want to do a taxation for the amount of THC which is in the product. So high THC products are higher, have a higher tax than lower THC ones, which I find kind of interesting, because I mean, this is like there needs to be sorted out some kind of way. Of course, like a lot of states are thinking about legalization of cannabis now, because they think, wow, here's like a box I've never opened. There are lots of money inside, so let's handle that, and let's check that out. And I can imagine that, especially after post-COVID times where they've been spent a lot of money, this is like a helpful like topic to get on. But of course, like here it needs to be very well balanced between what is working for the state and what is working for the consumer, because it would be a huge disaster if later on we still have the black market. I mean, that's the main purpose why we don't have that. We want that quality control. We need to be sure that we have a high quality product to an affordable price, so people would want to do that. I mean, but should not be impossible. We see that with the alcohol as well. I mean, there's not a lot of black market regarding alcohol, and the taxation is still there. It's something, and the tobacco is the same thing. So there needs to be sorted out. But just because we have that possibility of having now a new income in terms of tax doesn't mean that we have to take whole of it. I think it's more interesting to keep that in a way that it works for everybody, because if we make an error at this side, the whole project can be done in a very bad way. So this is, of course, a very, very important question here.
Yeah, definitely. Just before, Francie, if you had anything to say here, I just want to kind of put a reminder out for all of the viewers. This is your last chance. If you have any questions for Francie or for Janos, get them in the comments now. Francie, did you want to weigh in on this, on the taxation question as well?
Yeah, just a tiny little bit. I mean, I think overall we have to move over the black market to the legal market. But still, what we're seeing also in the medical field, usually very cheap product is the opposite of good quality. And I think we have to balance that. The taxation shouldn't be like that. It's no matter what the producer produces, it's still very expensive. So we have to balance that for sure. But in the end, we also should be very aware. We don't want to open the door just because of taxation to bring only very cheap, low quality product, because it's not helping anybody in the end.
Yeah, definitely. Recreational and medical alike. All right. So I think that's bringing us to the end of our conversation here. Unfortunately, I don't think, it's not like we got clear-cut answers on what's happening in Germany. So I think in 6 months' time, we're going to probably need to do a follow-up here. But thank you so much both for being here. Francie and Janos, we'll chuck some information in the links here so that if anyone wants to get in contact with you, they can do that. Where's the best place for them to contact you? Or what's the best way?
Email, I guess. It's really our email.
I think email or LinkedIn, it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a good way.
For sure.
All right, great. So we'll make sure that we put all those details there. And yeah, thanks again for joining. Have a good night, day, afternoon, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot for the invite.
Great. Speak soon.
Have a nice day.
Ciao.
All right.
Bye-bye.